All right, greetings, system failure listeners. Nate here, Brian over there. How we doing this week, Brian?
Hey, Nate, what's going on?
Well, we sadly have before us this morning coffees that are half decaf and half the regular medium roast Bajo Sombra Costa Rican coffee beans I normally bring around here for the podcast. It's our usual ritual to drink a bunch of caffeine and get wicked hopped up, and then try not to chatter too excitedly and quickly into the microphones. That's the challenge every week. But we're hurtling towards Sober October here. And, I've just been guzzling way too much coffee recently. Although the past couple of weeks I've been a lot better about, taking, multiple days off per week from drinking any coffee. But I did take for Sober October, I did order the dark roast caffeine-free beans from the same Costa Rican coffee company where I normally get my coffee from. Cafe Brit, it's delicious. Y'all can go online and type in Cafe Brit, find some fine Costa Rican coffees shipped to from their importer in Miami. You're gonna love it. The coffee grinder, right, it has a hopper in it that has I normally pour the heavily caffeinated regular coffee beans into. But in an effort to get set up for Sober October here, I ordered, as mentioned, all these decaf beans. And so as the hopper runs out, I refilled it with decaf. And so this was the last of the caffeinated beans mixed with some new decaffeinated beans. So we've got something like half strength coffee here, Brian. I can see the disappointment on your face even now as I'm saying the words. But I think Sober October, it's going to be a big Sober October for me this year. I'm wicked excited to cut out all of the things that have, all of the habits that your conscience tells you that they're bad habits. You know they're bad habits when you're doing them. But, some mornings you just want that cup of coffee and you're like, the hell with it. I'm wicked excited for some Sober October. I don't know, what do you think, Brian? We were talking earlier about how it's really best not to have coffee every single day, and that maybe is the issue there. I don't know. What are you thinking, Brian?
Yeah, well, we'll see if our caffeine-free podcast resulted in a precipitous decline or increase in the numbers and quality of the podcast.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if we think our pods are better or worse, and if the public thinks our pods are better or worse. Coffee or no coffee.
But yeah, well, in our age of, legalized marijuana, and there's also like the alcohol and, cigarettes and Zyn
pouches,
and all manner of pharmaceuticals available. You do have to, chart your course through it. And coffee is the best if you don't drink it regularly, right?
Yes. It used to be that we were hunter-gatherers, for most of the times our brains have been morphed by the titanic forces of Darwinian evolution. Most of that time has been in a hunter-gatherer context. In a hunter-gatherer context, Mother Nature is the gatekeeper of all the dopamine, right? If you come upon some red raspberries, you better stuff your face while the getting's good, because those red raspberries aren't going to be around for long. So it's like what we're really talking about, whether we're talking about caffeine or beers or weed or Zyn pouches. I can't even remember all the vices you just listed. Or going on Reddit, another addiction. It's really dopamine, right? That's what we're really addicted to here. Is that more or less accurate, or is it like oxytocin mixed in there too?
Well, it's like when you're playing Mario Brothers 3, right? And it's like 1994 or something, and it's your first time playing through. And then when you find like a one-up mushroom, it's like glorious manna from heaven. But when you've played Mario 3 for 20 years, you never die, and, you have infinite lives. And so the game, I don't know, well, it loses its challenge, and you have to negotiate like a postmodern landscape.
What you're implicating there seems like novelty, right? The idea, like, novelty is another great... There's some connection between dopamine and novelty, right? Like, that's why Reddit's so addictive. It's like you... get on really, I say Reddit because that's my vice of choice, but like the social media platforms where there's an infinite list, it's not like the old Google search engine where you had to click over to page 2 and click over to page 3. We're talking about a thing that loads the next item in the list for you. Very addictive. It's like a slot machine. It's got that variable reward mechanic where you never know if you're going to win or lose. And like that's the novelty. It's like that variable reward novelty. There's some connection there between dopamine and novelty.
Well, we're just not like in a state of scarcity.
Yes,
we're negotiating abundance.
Yeah. So now, but you're right. Mother Nature's not meeting out the dopamine. So now I have to be my own gatekeeper of my own, biochemical processes. And so I have to have the discipline not to, because raspberries are available year round, right? And I can't just shovel in raspberries, frantically at all hours of the day, right? You have to I have to be, like I said, be my own gatekeeper versus just letting circumstances be the gatekeeper that dispenses dopamine in some sustainable rate.
Well, it is interesting, this mantle that we've inherited, I suppose, because... And someone was talking about this, but I can't remember who. But animals don't really have the capacity to. I mean, I think if you just put, I don't know, raspberries in front of a monkey or bananas, they're going to eat the bananas and not worry about metering out their dopamine, right? But humans, we're not evolving anymore, at least physically. But there is some kind of mental, we're evolving culturally and mentally and whatnot. So our bodies are somehow capable of evolution, and we are growing somehow as we adapt to our environment. We're able to adapt much faster now by not having to rely on evolutionary adaptation, right?
One funny anecdote. Do you ever see those YouTube videos of the monkeys at the Polynesian beach resorts that steal the drinks off people? They're tiny little monkeys, they would sit on your shoulder-sized monkeys, we're not talking huge gorillas. And so if you leave your margarita unattended, they'll come and snatch it and they'll drink it, but because the monkey only weighs 15 pounds, gets hammered off of the dregs of your margarita drink. Yeah. And so the monkeys can't stop drinking these people's drinks, and of course they get hammered and fall down and stumble all over the place.
Yeah, passed out monkeys on the beach.
Well, they must feel terrible though, right? I mean, they must have the worst hangover. I mean, think about how the sugars must affect their poor little systems, their poor little pancreas. It's got to be rough. But yes, to your point, it's not so much what you're saying sounds about right to me. It's not so much that we're not evolving anymore. It's that the level of the level on which we are changing is happening. It's we're still evolving. Darwinian evolution still going on. Right? It's the great sources of novelty in the universe have multiple levels to them. There's regular chemistry, right, by which atoms are combined at the core of all the stars is nuclear fusion going on, right? And so your hydrogen atoms are being fused into helium atoms. That's what's going on in the center of our sun. Our sun is too small to do anything beyond helium, but the point is that when the heavier elements, the things that make up our bodies, like carbon, comes from the cores of stars that are much, much bigger than our sun. And so our star only converts hydrogen into helium, but then you would have a bigger star might combine helium atoms together to make lithium atoms, number 3 on the periodic table, and so on and so forth. And so it's huge stars go our star will not go supernova. It's not big enough to reach critical mass to explode. It will just expand into a red giant and then collapse into a brown dwarf. At least this is what the super sober and serious people in their white lab coats tell us, and I read it in the textbooks, and so I believe it. But that sun will not explode. It will it'll just kind of peter out as it runs out of fuel. Bigger star would of course explode and scatter the heavier elements created at its core, across the cosmos, and then that debris would coalesce into smaller stars like ours, like our stars, remains of a much bigger star. So the point is that there's a novelty introduced in the universe through the processes of regular chemistry taking place at the hearts of these stars. Right, so but that takes billions and billions and billions of years. All right, then this on top of that platform, the next layer is organic chemistry, right? Atoms that are based on that carbon ring. And that's really where Darwinian evolution comes into play, from the single-celled organisms marinating in the primordial seas of our planet.
Yeah, well, that's the great singularity, or one of them anyway, is when this biochemical evolution starts happening instead of just...
Yeah, that's it. And I just wanted to point out that the time scale is in millions instead of in billions of years, right? So novelty given rise to by the forces of Darwinian evolution are much faster than the old, cosmic building block, chemical building blocks, basic chemistry, organic chemistry.
So the first great singularity is whatever the progenitor, of just the cosmos and
Big
whatnot.
Bang, let's say.
Yeah. And then, the second one is like the biochemical engineering or whatever.
You got it.
And then the third one is like our intelligent. I don't know. There's either a third or a fourth one, because there's like the AI thing that we're developing. And I don't know if that counts as a singularity or if it's the same singularity as intelligent life. And there's just the evolution scale on which that we were just alluding to before, where we're not dependent on biochemical evolution for evolution to happen.
Yeah. So level 3 would be epigenetics, human culture, dance, song, language, things like this, right? And that changes. New artifacts and culture come about much faster than new artifacts in Darwinian evolution, right? So the time scale goes from billions of years for basic chemistry, millions of years for Darwinian evolution, and then thousands of years for human culture, right? And then so there's another singularity might be the dawning of human civilization, or the agricultural revolution, or something like that. The self-reflective apes climbing down out of the trees, something like that. And then to your point there, we're looking at another singularity now with artificial intelligence. And who knows what that's going to be, like this whole new form of life that doesn't require the human brain at all, doesn't rely, it's very interesting to see, it's like a new layer, a new source of novelty layered on top of the other three sources. And the time scale is really interesting. It does seem like history is speeding up as we go, right? It's like I always like to say, if you were a farmer in France in the 12th century, you might see one change to your plow apparatus that changes your life or something, but we're getting these life-changing pieces of technology every couple of years at this point. Obviously we are old enough to have our lives entirely transformed by the advent of the cell phone. Like nothing will ever be the same. So it is interesting to note that the rate at which novelty is introduced to our lives is increasing at what feels like an exponential rate, leading to this feeling of impending climax versus a feeling of sustainability or cyclical. It doesn't feel like history is cyclical. It feels like we're building up to some dramatic conclusion here. So all that is to talk about, addiction and dopamine, and we are in uncharted waters as far as dopamine consumption goes. This is why we've got the decaf coffee going this morning.
Yeah. Well, how's it going for you, staying off the Reddits and Twitters?
Well, as you'll hear in a few minutes, I've been on the Wall Street Journal, reading the old corporate media news a lot, so everything I have to talk about this week comes out of the Wall Street Journal. So I'll be doing a little bit of reading of snippets of Wall Street Journals. I have to say that, I don't feel that I get as nearly a good line of sight into what's going on by reading the Wall Street Journal. It is true that they have some journalistic standards of some kind, although there'll be some eye-rolling lines I'll read later. But I just feel that Reddit provides a much better line of sight into what's going on. It's just that it's addictive in nature. Consuming it begets more consuming of it. And you get into that weird place. It's great when you haven't been on Reddit for a couple days and you load it up and there's all manner of interesting things on there. But if you get to where you've already seen all the good posts and you're just scrolling looking for something to capture your interest, your brain's desperate for dopamine, but you can't find any. That's a terrible place to be in. And it makes it hard to read books when you're used to digesting information at a very rapid pace. It makes it hard to slow down and read books and So reading the Wall Street Journal has got me reading books again. Can't wait to talk about the new Dan Brown, the Da Vinci Code guy, has another book out this month. I've been cracking it. That's pretty interesting. Takes place in Prague, Brian, a city you and I have both been to. We'll talk about that in the second half.
Well, when you say that, you get better news or a better pulse of what's going on with regards to Reddit. So I guess, that's not information coming from like our all then, presumably, or is it? What information do you get that you like from Reddit, or where do you find that on Reddit? Or is it is it just like all the sources together so you can form a narrative in your own brain?
At some point this week, someone had posted. This is just an example. You remember Binga's Stadium here on Free Street in Portland, and then that thing closed down during COVID, like every restaurant, and it got replaced by this horrific restaurant, Free Street. Remember we went to Free Street for the Father's Day Boxing Pro Classic 2 years ago?
I do.
And, I mean, they didn't even know, the wait person had no idea what they had on the menu. They didn't get our order right. The food was terrible. It was comically overpriced. I mean, it was just a terrible... So, Free Street obviously closed down. It was just a terrible operation. And then someone on Reddit was wondering what's going into that space, because I guess there's construction going on there. And I would have no idea about this otherwise. I guess it's going to be a dispensary.
Shocker.
Yeah, that's really the only business that's really been booming here in Portland these past 10 years is the old marijuana dispensaries. And that's another avenue where it's going to be good. I mean, I started experimenting with weed in like my 30s. Like I was a very late comer to the old weed renaissance, and that's another one that really seems great at first, but really wears you down after a while. I had found in my weed career up until this past winter, the winter of 24 to 25, I used to just take months off of smoking weed. Like it was as easy to not be addicted to it. If I felt like I smoked too much, I would be like, well, I'll just take a month off and just shake the Etch-a-Sketch here and just make sure we're not getting into a state where we're dependent on weed. But then this last winter, I really found it impossible to take an entire month off. I kept on saying the hell with it. It's like a long, dark winter, and and I just kept using weed as a way to survive it. And so that's why I'm very excited to do Sober October, this month and really snatch the reins of control back, and go back to, piloting this stagecoach by my own volition versus being a slave to, weed addiction.
All right. Well, yeah, the Portland, Maine subreddit, I guess, is a good place to just kind of see what's going on and what the hubbub is. But, unfortunately, as I detailed last week, I got into some political argument about Charlie Kirk, and it wasn't great. And then the winters are increasingly. I mean, it's bad enough that it gets dark at 6:30 right now. I don't know what I'm going to do when we set the clocks back. That was really where I was at last winter. That 4:30 sunset, and it's like, all right, well, I'm done with work now. It's 5 o'clock. It's dark out. What am I going to do with my time? You can only watch so many old reruns of The Simpsons, or the Bruins games come on every 2 or 3 days. That's entertaining, but the days where there's no Bruins games, it's really slim pickings in the dopamine department. So hopefully during this month of October, I shall develop some constructive habits that I can use to see me through the darkest days of this upcoming winter without resorting to, excessive drug use to make ends meet. So it's been great. I've already been gearing up for Sober October in September by taking large tracts of time off from coffee and smoking weed. And we had a beer with with the Patriots game last week. That was fairly entertaining. The single beer, not getting a second one, just sticking with it. That was all right. And I also had a bunch of drinks in Asbury Park in New Jersey at the beginning of the month. But generally speaking, alcohol is very easy for me to not do for months on it. I just feel no compulsion with alcohol. Not like with this coffee and weed. That's the coffee, weed, Reddit. These are the big three for me. I would like to be jacked up on those things all the time.
Yeah, yes, and it's great when you first come back to them after you've been off them for a while. But man, they suck when you've been pushing that button early and often, and then you're going back to the source.
They really take your pain away.
Yeah. The other one is internet pornography. This is one you always talk about, Brian.
The P-Hub's a rough one.
Yeah, I have found since I turned 40, it is much easier to not have my mind obsessed with sex all the time. I feel like my relationship with sex is just where you'd want it. It's right there. You can go back and get it whenever you want it, but it's also not an all-encompassing, all day, every day sort of thing like it was for my teens, 20s, and 30s. So I'm pretty excited about that. That's a nice turn there. I don't feel like I'm getting too much of my dopamine from those unfortunate, darkest parts of the internet. So for me, it's like the weed, coffee, and Reddit. These are the three I got to stay off for the month of October. I can hardly wait to see how much better I feel by the end of the month. And we'll obviously be talking about this on the podcast. Hopefully, I'm not like a desperate fiend. Hopefully by the end of October, I sound, like very still just as excited about this as I am now. So yeah.
Yeah, the winter months are crazy. Working some crazy job and it gets dark at 4:30. That is the lament for sure. And you got some crazy political situation. People are getting shot, and the whole story is crazy, and society's falling apart. So yes, so I'm ready for a new adventure. I'm inviting aliens to abduct me, and I will fly the X-wing into the Death Star and blow it up or whatever needs to be done. I'm ready to go to a different planet.
Okay, so you're willing to volunteer for a suicide military mission if they will just affect your abduction and rescue you from the ruins of our political landscape. Is that what you're saying?
Well, if I can just be awoken to the nature of the universe in some level, or if I can just if they'll just tell me what the story is like with the UFOs and whatnot, I will fly the X-wing into the Death Star.
You'll be a loyal soldier, huh?
Yeah.
Just one final note on like Reddit is there is like the liability of the liability of Wall Street Journal is that it's a corporate-owned rag, as we'll find out in one moment when I talk about their hilarious article from yesterday on the French Revolution. But there's like the liability with Reddit is that there is bots. The thing is mostly bot accounts that are there to divide us, right? There to create an emotional reaction, right? That's what I'm really addicted to. When I see someone's shockingly horrible take, someone's pig ignorant take, on why we shouldn't be critical of the Democratic Party, for example. When I see that on Reddit, people defending the Democrats, it causes this emotional reaction, and that feeling, even though it's a negative feeling, like that feeling, you get addicted to the magnitude of that feeling. You know what I mean? Like outrage.
Well, that's the trap right there, for sure. Yeah, I've been suckered in many times.
I can't believe this person was so ignorant as to defend Kamala Harris, says I. I mean, it's like it's silly. I feel like I'm looking at, and maybe this is true of you, Brian. Tell me if this is your posture with respect to Reddit. I'm like looking for a change in the cultural zeitgeist. I'm looking for people to turn on the Democrats en masse and realize that they're just a wolf in sheep's clothing. I just feel like that's the shortest distance between me and the true pulse of public opinion. It could be an illusion because so much of that is bot accounts.
Those kinds of positions are what garner the most like bot attacks, right? Yeah. I mean, that's sort of that's basically what I was doing in the Portland, Maine subreddit last week, and there was all kinds of flack as you're over the target. Yeah, that's basically the way it goes.
Well, I do not agree with the prevailing worldview on Reddit, but I also don't agree with the blue MAGA prevailing worldview on Reddit is terrible. But then like the super conservative, everything's fine, corporate worldview in the Wall Street Journal is also there's nowhere that really represents. I suppose it would be dangerous if there was a Reddit that were just totally agreed with, like the milieu on Reddit agreed with my understanding of the situation. Then it would really be addictive. Then, so I suppose
that's like how it was when I first started, basically.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. The early days of Reddit, it wasn't loaded with bots, so it was it seemed like it was wild. In the early days, like 2010, it was like open atheism, and Bernie Sanders and things like that.
Random acts of pizza
and
rage faces.
And now it's like. It's just this, just a lot of bots trying to stir up emotions and to calcify divisions in our society.
The only place where reasonable political opinions are expressed are basically on podcasts, and then those people get lambasted on Reddit, basically.
Yeah. I agree. I mean, I think that the best source of news ultimately is Crystal and Sagar's Breaking Points. They're not owned by corporations, but they also have journalistic integrity. It's like the best of all worlds. The only issue is you got to listen to it or watch it. It's not in print form.
It's probably only a matter of time till there's some kind of like Reddit hate group devoted to. It's going to be a tough. I guess the strategy for our reptilian overlords is just to ignore Breaking Points. You'd think it would probably get more attention on Reddit, but I guess that's just what they have to like drown out. They just have to make the signal. Or the noise ratio really high so that people don't like talk about Breaking Points more.
It's a good thought. My prediction would be if you went on, I assume there's a Breaking Point subreddit. I bet if you went on there, it would all be people hating Crystal and Sagar's Breaking Points, right? like Joe Rogan and Bill Burr's subreddit. It's just nonstop hate for the product in question because it's all corporate bots being like, yeah, we can't have anyone talking about bad things. It's dangerous to talk about the bad things the Democrats do, because we've got Hitler in the White House, and we just got to focus on that and not on anything else.
Well, it is a tough nut to crack, because Sagar's a little right leaning and Crystal's a little left leaning, and like Crystal says things I can't stand, but sometimes Sagar, he'll do a boner and say something I think is retarded.
Oh yeah, his defense of like Diet Colas is just like, you got to be kidding me, dude. Yeah, I'll have a Diet Cola every once in a while with the lovely Tracy, but it's clearly poison, right? There's no way.
Well, betwixt the two, on the whole, though, the content is pretty reasonable, and they cover the issues sort of from both sides, effectively. So,
yes, I think Crystal and Sagar, that's really, they are a glorious lifesaver on the turbulent surface of the surface of the turbulent sea of our current society.
Which, just to close the whole thing about Twitter and Reddits and whatnot, not going on Twitter and Reddit, I've been doing it all week. It is crazy, because I'll go to take a dump, and I'll impulsively pull up my phone and start typing in Reddit in my browser window. Turn that off. That's relatively easy to do, but what is hard is to stay off the YouTubes, man. There's just so much content on YouTube's, like the breaking points and whatnot. Maybe I should just pay for their subscription, I guess, and get like the podcast form or something, right?
Well, if you go on, okay, couple of recommendations here for you. One, as we mentioned last week, we got our Pakistani YouTube premium account canceled for being back because we do not actually live in Pakistan. We're just using their currency conversion to get a super cheap annual subscription to YouTube. So now I am using the pirated version of the YouTube Music app through the revanced pirate. You can just go to the revanced app. You just search for it on Google. It will come up. I will show you how to do this, Brian. But there is a revanced Reddit app. Like you don't want to go to Reddit in your phone browser. You'll get hit with ads. Right. So
I just use the old .reddit, but yeah, that's what I was doing.
Well, if you would like a pirated version of the official Reddit app that you can log in and just have the ads be gone, then I will help you with that. And if you would like a pirated version of the YouTube Music app, where if you subscribe to Crystal and Sagar's Breaking Points podcast, the format is unbelievable. They split the Crystal and Sagar and their understudies, Ryan Grimm and Emily Jashinsky, right? They come on Monday through Thursday, and they have 5, 6, 7 stories a day. And they go and do a deep dive on these stories. It's a news format. They're sitting at a desk. It looks like the news, but they break the podcast into individual stories, so you can just skip the ones you don't care about. It's like listening to NPR, but you just got the whole list of the topics for the day, and you just pick the ones that you're interested in. It's super convenient.
On their regular YouTube channel, they kind of do that anyway,
yes.
But they like stagger the releases and whatnot.
Yep.
And
these would be these are the same videos, but in their podcast feed. So it's exactly that. And so you'll see that they come out every every hour. They come out with a new story. Unlike Monday, right? They're going to have 5 or 6 stories, and they're going to release them throughout the day. But when you finish with work and it's time to drive home or make dinner, why, all your stories will be right there, and you can pick and choose. It's just the greatest news format there is. It's outstanding. It does replace my beloved NPR, which I was once an aficionado of. I think I've told the story on this podcast before, but my main man, Dave Glarum, he was the classical music guy at WMFE in Orlando. Like, that was my classical music station in college. And I called in and made my first and only NPR donation and felt good about myself, right? But then the pledge drive ended that week, and then the next week they'd fired Dave Glarum and just brought in the canned classical music from Minnesota Public Radio. And I just really felt the cold slap of rebuke. It's like, well, never again. I remember there was a lot of soul searching with respect to NPR after the Iraq War. They were like, did we just stenographer? We just kind of non-critically repeated these claims about weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. We pledged to do better by our listeners. We're sorry we didn't. We just believed like the Colin Powells of the world and didn't dig into this any further. And so I was like, you know what, NPR, we all make mistakes. Let me send you a little donation. But then of course they fired Dave Glarum, and I still continued to listen to NPR for free after that. But the real insult came in 2016, where they just beat the Russiagate drum nonstop, and it all just turned out to be a big fat zero. And I'm like, oh, these people are not. This isn't. And then of course COVID was the final. I mean, you just can't. They're just not. They're just a rotten corpse of what they once were. NPR, which is really sad. I love their culture and everything about their programming, but I can't have them just repeating uncritically like intelligence deep state talking points that lead us to war, and never, it just can't be. So it's nice to have Crystalline Saga to fill that void. The audio news, you can put it up on your car, what have you. So we got to get you set up with Revance. In other words, Brian, my new thing is not paying for anyone's monthly subscriptions. I guess it's the only one I've got is the graphics editor. It's like $20 for a year for the graphics editor I use for the system failure graphics. But other than my cell phone, my car insurance, there's one more bill in there too. The electric bill. There's one more monthly subscription I've got. I can't remember which one it is, or monthly bill I've got. But yeah, my new crusade is no more of these monthly subscriptions. I'm done with that. So, all right. Well, we've done quite a bit here on the liabilities of dopamine. So, as mentioned, Brian, I've had my nose in the Wall Street Journal all week trying to do better, gearing up for Sober October here. And so, one example of the unfortunate reporting to be the one example of the bias to be found in the Wall Street Journal is their article from yesterday on the French Revolution. This is just really interesting. The headline here is "Panic-Inducing Rumors Went Viral Ahead of the French Revolution." And the subheadline is "Researchers Used the Tools of Epidemiology to Trace How False Tales Spread from Place to Place and Provoked a Revolt." Right? I mean, I've got just three short snippets here, just to give you a flavor of what this article was talking about. For centuries, historians have debated whether the Great Fear panic in the early days of the French Revolution was driven by the mass hysteria of ignorant peasants or a rational response to the famine and economic conditions of the day. To figure it out, Italian researchers applied modern-day tools of epidemiology to trace how the rumors that provoked the upheaval spread across France. In the summer of 1789, French peasants formed militias to combat bandits rumored to be attacking towns and villages, destroying crops and terrorizing peasants. When the brigands, which were believed to be acting with the support of the nobles, didn't materialize, the peasants turned against castles to destroy land titles held by local lords. Okay, so this was like an article in Nature, and basically this Italian group was using the models that model the way that diseases spread to model the way information spreads, and they use this to like come to some conclusion that like the French Revolution, what do they say here? To trace how rumors that provoked the upheaval spread across France. Now they're kind of talking specifically about the Great Fear of 1789, not about the broader French Revolution, but they blur that line to just make it seem like the French Revolution was just a big misunderstanding. It was just an upheaval, by ignorant peasants who, what are they doing? But then you click over to Wikipedia and you're like, well, what were the causes of the French Revolution? Here's what it says in quote: "Between 1715 and 1789, the French population grew from 21 to 28 million, 20% of whom lived in towns or cities, Paris alone having over 600,000 inhabitants. This was accomplished by a tripling in the size of the middle class, which comprised almost 10% of the population by 1789. Despite increases in overall prosperity, its benefits were largely restricted to the rentier and mercantile classes, while the living standards fell for wage laborers and peasant farmers who rented their land. Economic recession from 1785, combined with bad harvests in 1787 and 1788, led to high unemployment and food prices, causing a financial and political crisis, right? So what's really happening is you have a society and a minority of people abscond with all the wealth, right, and leave everyone else in a state of privation, and then you get this. It's not like the idea that the Wall Street Journal would frame this as rumors or misinformation spreading the way that a disease spreads. You're like, yeah, dude, people are starving. They didn't have enough to eat because some members of the society were hoarding, disproportionately hoarding wealth. The very same pleonexia our dear friend Plato implicated in the plight of the Athenian state. And then after Plato's death, the Roman Empire would become the sine qua non, the poster child for, greed destroying a society and ruining its chances of sustainability. All right, so it's just interesting to see the Wall Street Journal frame this eternal problem with pleonexia as like really a problem of misinformation and rumor, and not at all an economic problem of privation.
Well, what is the fear supposed to be? That society is run by pedophile aliens or something, or like what is the great fear?
Well, with specific context in the French Revolution, the great fear was specifically that there were brigands about who were doing violence on behalf of the noble class that was, absconding with everyone's wealth. I guess that I think is specifically what the Italian researchers were looking at, the great fear in that sense. But
they were worried that the elite were like hiring like mercenaries to stir up discord among the peasants, basically, is what the fear was.
Yeah.
Which is probably true, right? Isn't that the go-to play?
I mean, yeah, you would. It's not hard to see why people would come to that conclusion.
And that's what they do on Reddit. This is this is like the French Revolution version of Reddit.
Yeah. It is. That's a good point. It is a lot like Reddit. But anyway, that's the level of reporting we're getting in the Wall Street Journal. No mention of people starving. No mention of fat cats hoarding everything for themselves. That's all. No, the real thing we should talk about with respect to the French Revolution is problems of rumors and ignorant peasants being ungrateful for the wonderful society in which they live in. Of course, the story of the French Revolution, the three great estates of medieval society. You got the nobility, the church, and the peasantry. Because of the economic crisis, Louis XVI called the council? He called the Estates General. I'm sure with a French accent, it'd be like Estat General or something like that. But you have this big meeting of these three major pillars in society: the nobility, the church, the ecclesiastical, the clergy, and the commoners. And what happened is, like, the representative of the peasants just they just walked out of the negotiations and made their own assembly, and that was it. And they abolished feudalism and led to a reign of terror. And I always thought that podcaster Dan Carlin, with his hardcore history, he's got to do a treatment of the French Revolution. There's very few moments in history crazier than that incident. I can't believe he hasn't sunk his teeth into that meaty steak yet. But it's a wild story, and one that probably has lessons for America in 2025, eh?
Well, yeah. I mean, I guess the purpose of the Wall Street Journal is to like insulate the rentier class from the wilds of the peasantry, basically, at this point.
Well, that is exactly it. Yeah, So whenever you read the Wall Street Journal, you just have to be aware that you're seeing it through that lens. Every article, you might see on the Wall Street Journal an article about, the average home buyer is now 39. That's not great for society, and then you go in the comment section, there'll be people talking about, you just have to not live beyond your means, with no mention to the skyrocketing housing prices. It's just like, the Wall Street Journal is written by and read by people who got theirs and aren't worried about the growing proportion of people who are just live their lives in a state of abject economic dysfunction. And that was me for so long that I just really empathize with people living their lives in abject economic dysfunction. So that was a very interesting. I thought I would read it on the podcast here. Just an interesting take on the French Revolution. Like, these ignorant peasants. I mean, that's actually the word that they put in the article there. Okay, so moving on here. Let's see. I guess I wanted to gloat over the plight of libertarian Javier Milei down in Argentina. We'll have to save that for another episode here because we just aren't going to have time to cram that in today. But the latest news out of Argentina is that the $40 billion loan from the IMF back in April ain't going to be sufficient, and now the Milei government needs a massive bailout from the Donald. But I won't get into we don't have to get into the Wall Street Journal stories that go into the particulars of that. But it's like the idea that you're going to achieve prosperity by just cutting government spending. It's just not. Well, let's put it this way. I've got a line here. I just want to read you. Let's see. Okay, so here's a line from this is a January 2024 Wall Street Journal article. So I had done some deep dives here, but just appreciate this verbiage, right? This is one sentence from the article. Javier Milei, a political outsider who roiled Argentina's politics with his electoral victory in November, has set about radically reducing the state's role in his country's economy, where rampant money printing to cover generous public spending drove inflation to more than 200% last year. Okay. Generous public spending, the money printing to cover generous public spending. That's one way to write the article. But if I was writing this article, I would have written this instead. Almost the same thing, but just appreciate the difference here. Milei, a political outsider who roiled Argentina's politics with his electoral victory in November, has set about radically reducing the state's role in his country's economy, where rampant money printing to cover tax shortfalls drove inflation to more than 200% last year. You just appreciate that. You could say that a government deficit, in other words, is the result of generous spending, or you could say that the deficit is a result of uncollected taxes, right? It's like this, two ways of saying the same thing. And I just noticed that the Wall Street Journal, goes for rampant money printing to cover generous public spending, where I might have written rampant money printing to cover tax shortfalls, right? That just shows you what we're working with here.
Well, is there some kind of like IMF success story where like some small like Central American country, like took on a big loan and cut all their spending, and now they're somehow like basking in wealth?
Man, that is a great question. I have never heard of such an example. What the IMF does is they give out loans, and then these countries become economically, they become slaves to the interest, and they end up having to sell off their public infrastructure to service the loan, right? So so really the IMF is a lever that pries public infrastructure out of public hands and privatizes them, right? And that matches the economic culture, that matches our economic theory or whatever. That's the privatization is a big thing in the way that America operates these days.
I guess, one should read that Confessions of an Economic Hitman book, but yeah. And I guess I learned a little bit about the IMF in college, but basically that's my understanding.
Yeah.
You become a vassal state by taking on these IMF loans when you have no other choice. Right?
That's exactly it. It used to be that you would be a vassal state when Queen Elizabeth sent gunboats to your harbor and take it over and turn you into a colony, right? But we don't turn people into colonies it's still at gunpoint, but not so obviously anymore. Now you make mendicant countries by giving them these IMF loans. This is a domestic example, but I always like Dr. Michael Hudson's example of the city of Chicago selling off the revenue rights to their parking meters, right? Obviously, parking meters was a municipal function. But because the city of Chicago needed money, they sold those parking meters off to Goldman Sachs. And then Goldman Sachs sued the city of Chicago because they had closed down the street for a St. Patrick's Day parade. But Goldman Sachs wanted to be compensated for the lost revenue. It just shows you what we're talking about here. Privatization, right? It's not adding the profit motive here is not going to make things so efficient that it makes things cheaper for regular people. And to the contrary, you're going to end up with Goldman Sachs suing your municipality to retrieve lost revenue because they couldn't collect their money on St. Patrick's Day. It's just this wild stuff. And so that in a microcosm is how I envision the World Bank. That Confessions of an Economic Hitman is to the fore here. It's like there's no way that Javier Milei is going to be able to repair Argentina's economy by cutting public spending. What you need to do is ramp up public spending, but spend it on things that make money, bridges, for example, infrastructure, building out highways, internet, things like that, things that will make you money, things that will facilitate an economy. Not cut spending and drop taxes and not privatize industry. It's just not. You just end up in a terrible death spiral that way, and you end up dependent on the IMF and the World Bank. And then, of course, we all know if you decline to participate with the IMF and the World Bank, well, then you'll end up on General Wesley Clark's list of 7 countries to be invaded, in the lead up to 9/11. Right, that wasn't the big reason. Right, this is why Libya is on that list. In addition to being good for the Israelis, right, Muammar Gaddafi was trying to create some kind of a Pan-African currency and extricate himself from the world financial system, the global financial system of which the IMF and the World Bank are such prominent pieces. I wanted to take a moment to gloat about the hilariousness of the implementation of a libertarian philosophy. I'm sure if we had a libertarian on this very podcast, and we're going to have to summon our resident libertarian, I suppose, at some point here to talk about Javier Milei, but they might say that. Oh, I forgot what the libertarian was going to say. What would there be their critique of communism would be like, well, it's always a disaster every time it's tried. And I mean, you could counter, I'm looking for some real example success stories of libertarianism. They're going to be few and far between, and this is certainly not one of them.
Well, I feel like the libertarian argument is that the government can't be counted on to, I guess, invest money like responsibly into infrastructure that makes, like bridges and whatnot because it's corrupt. So we should let
Okay.
It doesn't really make sense.
Who has corrupted the government? When you say it's corrupt, who's doing the payoffs, right? It's going to be private industry, paying off government to not regulate them or to insulate their monopolies, right? That's what it's going to be. Either no regulation or regulation that is a barrier to entry to new enterprises, right? That's what it's going to be.
Yeah, well, I guess the thing I disagree with the libertarians about is that it's a problem of. It's not like a problem of like government being a problem, in and of itself. It's a problem of like transparency, right? And so and I don't see how you're not going to have the same issues if you just have like really rich people in charge. There's this idea that they're just going to accept like the externalities of their actions, I guess, which rather than try to unload them onto dump their toxic waste into the river, they just like won't do that for some reason, which I don't think has panned out well.
Let me put on my libertarian hat here. This is a pie. I mean, when I talk about like when you theorize about the utopian ideas behind like socialism or communism, right? Well, there's utopian ideas behind libertarian. So just appreciate this is utopian libertarianism. But Murray Rothbard, right, one of these prominent libertarian voices, he wrote Anatomy of the State. His idea is that you could find private ways to adjudicate disputes, right? You could have private security companies and private arbitration courts, to help decide these things. I mean, maybe it is really pie in the sky. It is really utopian, this idea that you're going to be able to accomplish all of this with, like if my neighbor burns a big leaf pile and the smoke damages my vinyl siding, right? The idea here is that that neighbor should have to pay for the vinyl. The idea is you want to match up like expenses and revenues, right? If that person caused the damage, that person should pay. What you don't want is the privatization of profits and the socialization of expenses, which you referenced mere moments ago. And so I just feel like we need, when the factory moves to town and starts polluting your river, right? The problem is that the factory is privately owned, and the private owner is going to be concerned with profit and not concerned about sustainability or environmentalism or the impact on the community. Right? If it was a democratically run system instead of a top-down autocracy, then you could juggle those juggling balls. Profit would be one juggling ball among one slider to optimize among many sliders instead of the overall point of the business. And when that factory like pollutes your local river, you have to have we need like a colossus of our own to fight against the corporate colossus that's polluting the river, and that's where government comes in handy. And if you're the one who has burnt your neighbor's vinyl siding, you might feel like when the courts make you pay, you might feel like your freedom is being abridged. But I suppose this really all goes back to, what do you think freedom really means? Does freedom mean a market free from regulation, as the current neoliberal philosophy suggests? Or does freedom mean freedom from people from privatizing their profits and socializing their losses onto you, right? That's what's happening when the factory pollutes your local river, right? The externality you mentioned is being pushed onto you, and they're washing their hands of it, right? So so I would say that real freedom is not having other people's expenses socialized onto you. And that is something that, corporate America just loves to do. It's great for their bottom line, right? It's like, it's great for those quarterly reports to, skip on your expenses, but recognize all those profits.
Well, the key to getting your rich neighbor or whatever who damaged your vinyl siding to be held to account, it's like a matter of public shaming, right? And so, I mean, it's just a matter of accountability and transparency.
You also need boots on the ground. If the neighbor refuses to pay, you need some mechanism to force this guy to pay, right?
True. Well, if you were in a community where community mattered, and you just weren't online and lived in a prison cell in the Matrix, basically. I mean, you being shunned from the community, I don't think it would really matter how rich you were, but maybe I think being shunned by the community would basically be effective enough in theory.
Well, I mostly agree with you. I think 97% of people, public shaming is enough to get us to fall in line, right? Shame is the glue that holds our society together.
But, well, there does come a point where there has to be a fight, though.
Yeah, because we got psychopaths and sociopaths who don't care about public shaming, right? And corporations are perfectly psychopathic and sociopathic because they don't have empathy, right? They're corporations, they're abstractions. And so at a large enough level, with absentee owners who care only about profit, they become these perfectly sociopathic institutions that care not at all about the social impact, and they care only about maximizing those quarterly reports. They got to show those profits every quarter, bump that stock price up.
Well, in any case, like, it's taken, like, Donald Trump managed to do this magic trick where, like, the whole, like, America First MAGA base movement felt that he, like, wasn't a Zionist shill, which I assume that's important to a lot of the MAGA voters, although you got, like, your Ted Cruz type MAGA person who somehow is an Israel first, America first.
Well, he gets checks from AIPAC, you know? Like, if AIPAC was funding this show, we might have some very different takes.
Yeah, well, there's a certain number of people who are caught under that spell in any case.
Yes, yeah.
Like, I don't know, like, I thought that, you know, Donald Trump, like, I don't know, might release the Epstein client list or something, like, up until very recently, unfortunately. Well, I mean, like, it took, like, a good, I don't know, I'm not sure how long it took public opinion to turn against Israel. I don't know if you want to use, like, 1967 as, like, the start. I don't know what starting point you want to use, but it's taken, like, a long time for public opinion to turn, and now it's really turned. And I mean, you got to think that's a credit to, like, basically podcasting is, like, what's made that possible. And so it's the transparency and accountability that really matters. And then you have these issues. I don't know. I guess, like, if you have some psychopathic landowner destroying everyone's vinyl siding, like, at some point people have to get their torches and guns and, you know, rakes or whatever, and carry the guy out of town on a log. As to how do you like make a government and make, like, I don't know. That's all, like, a fine thread to thread to. Needle
fine needle to thread. Yeah, that's it.
Anyway, but obviously, fundamentally, transparency and accountability are the key things to keeping things working, right?
Well, I'm, again, about 95% in agreement. Yeah, I like what you're saying, and I agree that, you know, public shaming or accountability or transparency, these are necessary, but I don't think they're quite sufficient, because I do notice that the U.S., despite horrific unpopularity, is still proceeding with still proceeding with the genocide and still proceeding with aiding and abetting the genocide in Gaza. We're not turning course like you and me and many people hope that Donald might do something different with Gaza.
Well, the truth is, I mean, why isn't that changing? Well, it's because, you know, we're like a bunch of sheep on a farm, and however much the sheep, baa and bleat or whatever, it doesn't change the fact they're being, you know, taken to the butcher.
Yeah.
But maybe if the sheep have a collective realization about the nature of their plight, that you might be able to change the system. I mean, the thing is, like, sheep aren't, like, smart enough to, like, change their circumstance, whereas humans are. But so I don't know that accountability and transparency isn't working. What we just need is, like, more accountability and transparency than what we have now.
Yep, and I think that's well said. And I think part of that is, you know, taking with a lot of grains of salt the things you read up on the Wall Street Journal, there are so many bad actors out there, you know, creating bot farms and and writing Wall Street Journal articles to muddy the waters and prevent the sheep from coming to the realization. Wait a second, there's only a handful of farmers and there's thousands of us. So why are we letting them push us around? All right, there's only so far that you can mistreat the sheep before that realization starts to bubble up in the public consciousness, eh? Yeah. Okay. Well, I swear, man, we are really we're talking. I thought I had, like, way more topics to get to today, but I suppose the one last one here that we just got to get to is this business about Peter Thiel and the Antichrist. Have you heard about this, Brian?
Yes.
Peter Thiel apparently is giving so Peter Thiel is he's like a billionaire, one of these Silicon Valley tech billionaires, right? He's someone that's well connected, someone that like invites characters like Joe Rogan to his house for dinner parties, right? And so he is giving these this lecture series on the Antichrist. So I'll just pull up the Wall Street Journal article here. I got just a few excerpts to read.
Well, I just had this photo of Peter Thiel on the article. It's not very. He looks crazy. He looks like a madman.
Yeah, something's up with this Peter Thiel. I mean, yes, clearly. And I love that you pointed out, I didn't look closely at the picture. Now, obviously, this Wall Street Journal article comes with a picture of Mr. Thiel sitting in a chair speaking into a microphone. And yeah, he looks like some unholy representative from the devil. You're right, Brian. But this article, the headline is, Peter Thiel wants everyone to think more about the Antichrist. And the subheadline is, during appearances, the billionaire has offered his analysis on technology, government, and a biblical perspective on the end times. Just to excerpt a little bit here. Peter Thiel, the billionaire investor in data, AI, defense, and weapons development technology companies, wants everyone to think more about the end of the world. For about a year now, Thiel has been publicly laying out his understanding of biblical prophecies and the potential for the rapid advance of technology to bring about an apocalyptic future. In a lecture Monday, he encouraged an audience to continue working towards scientific progress, whether in artificial intelligence or other forms of technology. Fearing it or regulating it or opposing technological progress would hasten the coming of the Antichrist, Thiel said, according to people who attended. A devout Christian, Thiel is expanding on a number of speeches and public interviews he has given about the Antichrist in a closed 4-part lecture series this month in San Francisco. The second lecture happened on Monday, and the series will end in early October. This is how Thiel says the end of the world might happen according to a Wall Street Journal review of his recent lectures. Existential risks will present themselves in the form of a nuclear war, environmental disaster, dangerously engineered bioweapons, and even killer autonomous robots guided by AI. As humans race towards a last battle, the Armageddon, a one-world government will form, promising peace and safety. In Thiel's reckoning, this totalitarian, authoritarian regime, with real teeth and real power, will be the coming of the modern-day Antichrist, a figure defined in Christian teachings as the personal opponent of God who will appear before the world ends. So, if I'm reading that right, it sounds like Mr. Thiel thinks that the Antichrist is either an attempt to regulate or slow down AI development, or otherwise a world government that will arise and like, what does he say, attempt to promising peace and safety, but this totalitarian regime, will be the coming of the Antichrist. So what he seems to be like, what the way I'm reading this is that like Peter Thiel thinks that the realization among the sheep that they're being, lambs to the slaughter, right? That realization, and they're banding together to make their own colossus to fight back against companies like Thiel's Palantir, right? That is the Antichrist, according to Peter Thiel, right? So anyone who wants to stop him from doing his work, basically. Anyone who wants to stop him from amassing unlimited wealth. Anyone who wants to put limits or curb his, his projects he's creating. That is what Thiel identifies as the Antichrist. Very interesting stuff here.
Well, it is interesting. I mean, one thing is that, it's been a bailiwick on this podcast, but the people in charge, they say that they're very, they say that science is the way, basically, but then, they go to Bohemian Grove and, worship Moloch, and so there's something going on there where it's not just like the science-driven thing that their belief structures, they do believe in things like the Antichrist or whatever. But yeah, apparently Peter Thiel thinks that the Antichrist is like the socialist uprising, which is, I guess makes sense. I mean, he probably would think that, I suppose.
Max Blumenthal, the noted journalist, was up on the Dave Smith's podcast talking about the Charlie Kirk assassination this past week and the way that the powers that be are trying to paint the shooter to be a leftist, like 50% of, like they're trying to really exacerbate the culture war, and really blame like all leftists for this assassination of Charlie Kirk. And with respect to that, he had this quote from Max Kemp. Let's see, I'm going to pull it up here. He had this quote from Alex Karp, excuse me. Alex Karp is the CEO of Palantir, right? And his quote is, he says that the purpose of Palantir is to, quote, prevent social unrest from affecting or disrupting the lives of the 1%. That's his description of the Palantir business model. And boy, doesn't that say it all right there, huh?
Yeah. Well, it's just obvious that if, some prophet were to arise and, give voice to the logos or whatever, and, unify the masses, that, he would be declared to be the Antichrist and, crucified publicly.
Yeah.
Yeah, the bit about how Palantir is, they're trying to protect the 1% from political turmoil is pretty wild.
Yeah,
that's absolutely crazy. But I mean, I guess that totally makes sense, and that's what the Wall Street Journal is also trying to do, basically.
Yeah. Yes, and the bot farms on Reddit, of course. So I guess to me, I just have to remember when I look at Reddit, not during October, when I look at Reddit, you just have to remember that people are pulling the levers for Kamala Harris and for Donald Trump. Good people are pulling levers for most of the people who are voting for Kamala are doing so because they're good people and they generally think that's better for the country. Most people pulling the lever for the Donald are good people and they're doing that because they think it's what's best for the country. And we shouldn't fall for the characterization of the few nutters on either side. We shouldn't allow these perception shapers, the bot farms on Reddit, the Wall Street Journal, to make us believe that the outliers on either side are representative of the entire voting bloc, either lefty or righty. So we got to keep your eye on that prize. 95% of us are genuinely good people, and we vote for what we think is, for the best for everyone. And of course, 5% of us are going to have ulterior motives, are going to be psychopaths, are going to be confused, are going to be mean-spirited, whatever, what have you. But most people, most of the time, generally very good. And so we got not allow this division and bifurcation to take hold. Yeah.
Well, podcasting sure breaks, our reptilian overlord's ability to hijack our attention span. And because on Reddit, you have these not positive political discussions, but just for some reason it's easy to listen to an hour-long podcast, or it's entertaining or interesting. And so, as much as the state of the discourse is enough to make anyone shed a tear on Reddit, you just can't. It just doesn't really work to say that Joe Rogan's a terrible person, because it's easy enough to listen to his 3-hour podcast for some reason.
To your point, even though all of our attention spans are blown out by Instagram and TikTok, the rise of long-form podcasting alongside the rise of long-form storytelling, a la Game of Thrones on HBO, is a positive and encouraging sign for that society. That we aren't just being ground down by these attention stealing mechanisms, and that people are paying attention, and people are out there. It is very reassuring that that podcasts and long form storytelling are on the rise. Alongside these disastrous apps that hijack our attention span. So that is very encouraging, and it's fun to be a part of that process by spitting our own nonsense into the can every week. Brian?
Yeah. So Peter Thiel, you can suck it.
Yes. Maybe I should make that the title of this episode. Peter Thiel can suck it. All right, well, we're up against an hour here, Brian. I suppose we ought to give the ears of our valued listeners a little bit of a break. But if you want to get in contact with either Brian or myself, you can accomplish that over at the systemfailure.org website. Just point your browser window to the About page and click on the appropriate name. And furthermore, you can sign up at systemfailure.org to read the weekly essays on the grand trajectory of human civilization written by yours truly. And, our podcast also features the Thursday feed where I do an audio essay read of the very same. So we'll see you all over at systemfailure.org. Thanks for listening. We'll be back next week. Can't wait to talk to you then.
Alrighty.